welcome. I wanted to talk today a little bit about one of the early Buddhist teachings, right view. And when I first heard that there was a teaching called right view, different to wrong view, I remember thinking, well, I mean, who decides what the right view is and the wrong view is? That seems kind of confusing. But over the years, I've just really grown to appreciate how much is embedded in those two words, right view. There's a lot in there. In many ways, you could say, if we don't have right view, all the other aspects of our practice will falter to some extent. It's okay for us to not have everything right, but just broadly to be having some broad sense of seeing the world with some kind of accuracy. So I'm going to go into that a little bit. Just on a general level of everyday life, it comes in handy to get things right. Just on an ordinary, everyday level, it's good to drive on the right side of the road for whatever country that you're in, and to understand what the different colours of a traffic light are referring to. It's good to know what foods are healthy to eat and what are not. So just in ordinary life, having a fairly correct understanding of just everyday things is more likely to lead to a somewhat more peaceful and relaxed life. Doesn't guarantee you a peaceful and relaxed life, but it's more likely, if you're just getting the broad sense of how the world works a little bit more accurately. And the more complex things get, I mean, there's some things that we have all fairly common agreement on, like 2 + 2 is 4 is fairly commonly agreed. And as things get more multi-layered, there's more disputes about what's right and what's wrong about something. But we can generally say it's probably better for people to think that the earth is round than flat. Maybe better to think that the earth goes around the sun than the sun goes around the earth. And so on. If you hold a completely inaccurate view, it's likely to result in making poor choices and poor decisions. So it's good, I think, to strive, generally speaking, to have a fairly well-informed view about just the way the world works and the way people work, how dynamics between people. I think it's a beneficial endeavour to try and have a broad, general, accurate view about how the world works and how people work and so on. None of us can get it all right, of course. It's far too complex. And the more complex it is, even in the conventional sense, the consensus changes over time about facts. I mean, this is the basis of science, that all the facts in science are provisional to varying degrees. And they do change over time as more information comes in. So that's a valuable way to think of right view. But I think here the Buddha's thinking of right view in a slightly different way. More in the sense of what are some universal truths? What is true that applies to everyone and everything? It's this kind of right view that the Buddha was talking about, that when we hold that right view, even if things are difficult in our life, we can have a level of equanimity within us and have a compassionate, caring heart and be wholesome and beneficial in the world. If we have this right view that applies to absolutely everything. And you can read about what these various right views are. They're written about in different ways. But in many ways, I think our job is through our study, through our Zazen practice and our contemplation, just observing the experiences that come in through our senses, for we ourselves to try and get a sense of what broadly is true for everything. What's broadly true for everything. So it's good for us to kind of try and explore that ourselves so that we feel it inside ourselves. But we can certainly look to the teachings for guidance. So, for example, one universal truth, you could say, that applies to every person, every plant, every animal, every inanimate mineral, that applies to everything in the whole universe, you could say, is that everything is in a state of constant movement. Everything is changing, sometimes rapidly, sometimes very slowly, and of course rapid and slow are just relative depending on who you are and where you stand at the time. But that you could say is a universal truth. And there's no exception to that. Everything, and if you contemplate it closely enough, you see that of course this is true. It's not actually very hard to understand this intellectually. It's a lot more difficult to really understand it on a felt level, on an emotional level, to truly accept the state of perpetual flux that everything is in. That is a little more difficult. We tend to get attached to things like our house or our children or our body. It's a little harder emotionally to fully not just see but accept and try to function within this universal truth of eternal flux. Always was, always will be. So that would be an example of what you could say is a right view. Another right view, the way I like to word it, is everything, every person, every plant, every animal, every object is worthy of being treated in the first instance with some respect. Everything without exception. Just in the first instance with some respect. So it doesn't mean that you don't say, oh, that piece of plastic on the ground, I'm going to pick it up and put it in the rubbish bin. You don't have to say, how beautiful it is, I'll leave it there. It doesn't mean that. But it means that the other way of saying everything is worthy of respect. The way of saying that in the negative is nothing deserves to be hated. That would be the way to put it. So a piece of plastic doesn't deserve to be hated. A piece of trash on the ground, rubbish on the ground, doesn't deserve to be hated. A person who does great harm to others doesn't deserve to be hated. And this, of course, is very difficult for people to apply without exception. I don't know if it's most people, but we could say many people have got at least some people that they harbour some ill will towards, or if not exactly ill will, a kind of tight, closed heart towards. It's not saying we have to actually love them as in, I like them, it's nothing like that, but just to harbour no ill will. And that would be right view, I would say, is to really contemplate that nobody deserves, no plant, no animal, no person, no object deserves to be hated and to have ill will wished upon it, harm wished upon it. So each of us, I think, needs to work out for ourselves what does right view mean. And I want to read just what got me thinking about this was a paragraph that I read a few days back. referenced this book before, The Noble Eightfold Path, by Bhikkhu Bodhi, his commentary. And this was, the Buddha's first teaching after enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. He had profound insight into the causes of suffering and the way to be liberated from suffering, which, as we all know, doesn't mean to be liberated from the inevitable suffering of the body and of social relations. Things do go wrong, but to be able to work with them with equanimity and not create additional suffering by thinking a whole bunch of things that are wrong view in the end, that are unnecessary. So, for example, this morning, at the very last minute, we had started setting up the zendo in the main altar space where we sit, and then we found out that we needed to come to a different space. So the right view, for me, the right view was, no problem at all. We'll just move. It's a bit of a rush to get everything over here and so on, but no problem. And that having that view that this is a thing that's happening, there's no point in arguing about it, this is just how it is. So to be able to go, no problem, resulted in a sort of general sense of fineness, okayness. Whereas a wrong view might have been, this is so unfair, we should have been given notice, they should have told us yesterday so we could have planned this ahead and got here earlier, and so on and so forth. That, I would say, would be wrong view, because there is no particular reason why we should have been told yesterday. It might have been nice to have been told, but there's no reason why we should have been. Nobody's at fault here. It's just one of those things that happen sometimes. Scheduling, things happen. So the wrong view would have resulted in an internal constriction and wasted energy of maybe anger or judgmentalness or feelings of righteousness, something like that. Whereas, no problem, that's okay, resulted in everything just more or less working out fine. There may be someone who came late and now has gone home because they've gone like, where are they? That may have happened, but that's also okay. That's also okay. So this paragraph I want to read, it's a little dense. There's a lot, but then we'll unpack it a little bit. Oh, so I didn't quite get to finish what I was saying, that the Buddha, after realizing suffering, the causes of suffering and the way to be liberated from suffering, he outlined a pathway to that liberation called the Noble Eightfold Path. And the first step on that path is right view. That's the first step. It doesn't mean you have to get right view before you can do other steps on the path. It doesn't mean that at all. Our right view is a constantly evolving, deepening over our lifetime of practice. The nuance, the subtlety just never ends. It just never ends. So it's not a static thing, because nothing is static. We're constantly deepening our understanding of right view as we practice. Right view is the forerunner of the entire path, the guide for all other factors. The other factors here referring to, the eight factors are right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. That's the Noble Eightfold Path. And they all have the word right in front of them, and we have to discover for ourselves, with the help of the teachings and the ancestors and our Sangha, what that means. It's not a rigid dogmatic right. It's a broad, very broad overview sense of right. It enables us to understand our starting point, our destination, and the successive landmarks to pass as practice advances. To attempt to engage in the practice without a foundation of right view is to risk getting lost in the futility of undirected movement. And it gives the example of if you're trying to get from A to B but you don't know where B is, you're going to be just moving about in an inefficient, ineffective way because you don't know where you're going. So right view gives us not a place to go, but a view to have, an overview to have of ourselves and of everything that we experience through our senses, through our eyes, through our ears, through our bodies, and so on, and through our thinking mind. And this question too, what is right view, is kind of a question just to hold forever. It's not a question to just get a single answer to. It's not like that. Often in Zen, a question is posed, particularly in Zen, I think there is the tradition of posing a question and not really jumping to an answer. It's more a lifelong contemplation. What is right view? It can just be a lifelong contemplation. We kind of answer it, like I've just gave a couple of examples, but even then we also just hold it. We just hold it as a open-hearted, creating a stance of curiosity and wonder, rather than a stance of blinkered, closed, I've got it, I've got the facts and that's it. You know. So what is right view? We can hold that quite widely, while also having a certain conviction too that everything is in a state of constant flux and everything is worthy of respect, including ourselves. Our views condition our actions. They lie behind our choices and goals, and our efforts to turn these goals from ideals into actuality. Actions themselves might determine consequences, but the actions along with their consequences hinge on the views from which they spring. Since views imply an ontological commitment, a decision on the question of what is real and true, it follows that views divide into two classes, right views and wrong views. The former correspond to what is real, the latter deviate from the real and confirm the false in its place. So this is quite sort of to the point here. I would say with sort of, I guess, confidence that it is wrong view to go around hating things. The Buddha would say that is wrong view. It's okay to not prefer certain things. And it's okay to maybe, or to have the feeling, I'm feeling like I hate someone, and then go, oh, that is interesting. Is that a good idea? Where does this come from? I wonder why I still have such a constricted feeling about my neighbour, my parents, my ex-partner, whoever it might, my boss, my ex-boss. That's interesting that I feel that way. But it would not be right view to say it's fine for me to enjoy imagining terrible things for that person. That would be wrong view. So although we think of right view as a very broad sort of looking at things, the universal truths, it does have an exacting quality to it as well. There is a precision to it as well that sort of demands of us, if we want to really practice, to look closely at what we think and what we say and what we do, and go, is this right view right now? And it can be very subtle. I think for most of us, we probably don't engage in, flagrantly unwholesome activities or thoughts or speech, but they can get more and more subtle, more and more subtle. Like, it would be, I think, slightly wrong view to have been annoyed about changing where we sat today. And the right view was to be, no problem. And that feels, often you can feel It's like a mindfulness spell when you feel your body constricting and your mind kind of narrowing down, like as if your eyes have kind of closed down and you're overly obsessing about something. It's usually an indication that maybe coming from a wrong view perspective. So right view is referring to what is real and true, and wrong view is confirming what is false. These two different kinds of views, the Buddha teaches, lead to radically disparate lines of action, and thence to opposite results. If we hold a wrong view, even if that view is vague, and I want to come back to that point, it will lead us towards courses of action that eventuate in suffering. On the other hand, if we adopt a right view, that view will steer us towards right action and thereby towards freedom from suffering. Though our conceptual orientation towards the world might seem innocuous and inconsequential, when looked at closely, it reveals itself to be the decisive determinant of our whole course of future development. The Buddha himself says that he sees no single factor so responsible for the arising of unwholesome states of mind as wrong view, and no factor so helpful for the arising of wholesome states of mind as right view. So it mentions here a little bit about I mentioned the word vague and innocuous. So even if we hold, we just, sometimes people think it's kind of okay to kind of not like certain things, as in like dislike. And it might seem innocuous, but actually I think it's good to work on it. So often people have something like they don't like spiders, for example. And it's not terrible to not like spiders, but actually as practitioners, it really would be good for us to go, I'm pretty good with all these other things, but I've really got a thing about spiders. Maybe I should contemplate that there's a mum and a dad spider, and they have little babies, and they're just busy trying to make sure that they have enough food for their family so that they can procreate and pass on their genes, just like humans do. That's what humans do too. So even if it seems like it's just not really a big deal, like maybe you have a bit of a tendency to be judgmental about other drivers on the road, for example. Lots of people are like that. You can be judgmental in totally opposite ways. You don't like slow drivers, they annoy you, and they follow the rules too much. They should have gone through that orange light, but they didn't. You might have that kind of attitude. Or you might have the opposite attitude. Why do people drive so fast? Why do they change lanes so quickly? They should be more careful. Whatever thing like that, and most of us have some things like that, we are being asked as serious practitioners or dedicated practitioners to look at these little spots in our lives and go, I think I'm going to see if I can work at being more compassionate about these things, whatever these things are. Because they're not just innocuous and they're not just vague. They might seem like they don't matter, but actually another right view is everything matters. As in every action has an effect. Every thought has an effect, every word has an effect, every action has an effect. It might be extremely tiny, like my moving something might have a neutral effect in the general sphere of things, but it's not no effect. There's nothing that we think or say or do that has no effect. This is another right view. It doesn't mean that we need to get overly fearful about it. Everything we say and do and think, but if we do understand everything that we say and do and think is creating the conditions for the next moment, and that applies to everyone, then if I have a tendency that I know is a little unwholesome, well, I'm a sincere practitioner. I want to work on that. It's not inconsequential. It might be little, no need to make a drama out of it. But, maybe let's work on that. If we can find the energy. And if we can't, then we can just notice, I can't seem to find the energy to work on that. That's okay too. But we can just note it. I'd like to get to the point where I can be a little bit better about whatever that is. And this last part here, the Buddha himself says that he sees no single factor so responsible for the arising of unwholesome states of mind as wrong view, and no factor so helpful for the arising of wholesome states of mind as right view. It's a pretty powerful teaching to encourage us. So I was going to read a few other things, but I think actually I won't. I'll just see if anyone would like to comment or ask a question. Lauren, I think the space is small enough that we'll be able to hear each other.
Thanks, Neti. I was thinking about why right view is first, and it makes me think of what you just said at the end about we can note what right view is, and we might choose to do something different. As in, maybe not to have right thought, following the right view, not have right speech or right action. But just that act of being able to appreciate that this is the better course of action, even if we don't end up taking it because for whatever reason, I think is quite powerful. And I think that can help us not be, I know I have found it helpful to think, even if I'm not doing the ideal thing, the fact that I'm aware that there is an ideal thing that I'm not choosing to or I'm incapable in this moment of doing, I think is an important step.
Yes, thank you for saying that. That's right. We have to be compassionate towards ourselves, that we can't always think, say or do what we would kind of like to sometimes. Or we just impulsively just make a little mistake. Well, we can forgive ourselves for that mistake, but noticing that we've made it is a really wonderful step. You could say that is an act of grace, simply to notice, that we spoke ill of someone, maybe just because we felt hurt, and then the circumstance arose that we could speak ill of them, and so we did. And then we think like, maybe I'll try next time not to do that. But we don't have to get too upset about it, but as you say, to notice it is a very important step, yes. Jissen.
It strikes me like a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, I don't know, you were talking about embodied practice, and it strikes me how the Eightfold Path is about embodied practice, and I wonder if you would like to say some more about that.
Or did you have some thoughts that you would like to share about that?
Oh, well, just how all right view, right speech, right thought, like all these things, they go together, and to be, from what you were saying today, they come from a kind of an inner alignment, and that inner alignment is to do with not being attached to things, Like when you're grasping, when your mind is grasping, when you're grasping, creating yourself, and there's attachment there, then we lose the embodiment, that we separate ourselves from everything. So our way of being in the moment, action, speech, thought, blah blah blah, is not embodied in that moment because of the separation.
Yes.
Little lead in.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And even though we say thought, speech, and mind as if they're three different things, of course they're not really three different things. Whenever we think something, our body is already doing something, like the heart rate is going up, or the breathing is becoming more shallow, or the heart rate is settling down and the breathing is calming. You know, that it's not a clear line that distinguishes thoughts from the body. The body and the thoughts go together. And even speech, we're talking to ourselves in our heads. Like, we think in words, so our speech has already started before words come out of our mouth. Speech has already started in our mind. And you can also say action has already started, because again, when we're thinking, the majority of people, I have learned that it doesn't apply to absolutely everyone, but the vast majority of people think in pictures, so already their body is moving in the mind. So of course another right view is that everything is boundless, which means there is no actual hard line dividing anything from anything, including thoughts, speech, action. It's not a clear cut, there's not a clear cut line between those things. So we are embodying the teachings, whether we're thinking about them, speaking about them, or acting them. It's all a way of embodying. Because I tend to have the tendency towards, which Hui Nang, our sixth ancestor, also emphasized this, that the mind is where it's kind of at. What you do in your mind, then the speech and the actions tend to flow from that. But of course, there's also the practice of disciplining the action, which trains the mind, you know, choosing not to do certain things or to do certain things. Like, I'm going to practice doing prostrations, even if I don't feel very humble, let's just say. But in doing the prostrations, you start thinking, gosh, this is actually beautiful. It's something, I don't know, I just feel like I'm forgetting about myself and stop worrying about myself. This is great, I love this. So sometimes we can just lead with the body, and then the mind follows. Yeah. Speak up.
Yep. Thanks, Lauren. So it just reminds us of the interconnectedness of our practice, of all the essential Buddhist concepts. And we discussed this the other day, where if you were to, and you don't have to have taken Jukai to live by the precepts, but if we look at the precepts and we fashion our how we behave in the world according to the precepts, or certainly with a nod to the precepts, well then it's going to shape right view. Right view will evolve from that practice.
Yes.
Yeah. Along with right thought and right speech. And,
yes.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me.
Anita.
Our thoughts this morning. Been a really good discussion that we're having. One thing I wanted to say, well, for me anyway, is I don't know what it's like for everyone else, but having that right view, it's also important for me not to manufacture someone else's ill will onto me. So avoiding those mind reading, fortune telling tendencies. So I was dropping my youngest child off at school the other day, and they go to like the basketball court and they all line up and do morning lines. And so I dropped her off a little bit early, and she got very, very upset from that separation, me having to go to work and her going to school. And I could just feel the parents' eyes all over me, one by one, because she was getting increasingly more and more and more upset at me trying to leave her at the morning lines. And while it's not new for her, that morning was particularly bad, and it's because I think one of the reasons was the tooth fairy forgot to turn up to her. So she had a very bad start to the morning. Anyway, those eyes on me, for that right view, for me, was not to manufacture their ill will about my parenting skills, and just let it be. And yes, some of them might have been having, bad thoughts about my parenting. I don't know, but it was important for me not to manufacture that ill will onto me from them when they hadn't even said anything. Yeah.
This is so great, because now here's another right view. Is that we don't know anything. That in the end we can't know for certain, particularly around the phenomenal world. And I would say, as many people do, particularly what other people are thinking, what's motivating and driving people. We can never get that right. We can do some approximation. So, maybe it would have been nice for you to imagine that a lot of them were thinking, oh my God, she must be feeling so embarrassed right now. I would feel embarrassed now too if that was happening to me. I remember that happened with my kids once, that hopefully a lot of them were feeling sympathetic towards you. And you don't know. You just don't know. Yeah. Very good. Right view. It's so great. All right, we better finish up. We've got to pack up lots of things because we've got a zazenkai tomorrow. We've got quite a bit to get done this afternoon. So thank you, everyone. And we'll finish by chanting the last little chant on there, and then do 3 prostrations together. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it.